What if I told you that the money in your wallet, the balances in your bank account, even the retirement funds you've spent a lifetime building might not truly exist in any tangible sense? What if I told you that governments and central banks can create it from nothing, inflate it or strip it of value, and yet convince you to treat it as sacred and reliable? It sounds like fiction or a conspiracy, doesn't it? But it's not. This is the reality we live in, and the turning point, the moment everything changed, happened quietly, while most people carried on with their daily lives unaware. The date was August 10th, 1971. President Richard Nixon appeared on television one evening, interrupting programming across the nation. Speaking with measured authority, he announced that the United States would temporarily end the dollar's convertibility into gold. In plain terms, foreign governments could no longer exchange their dollars for gold reserves. Temporary, he said. Emergency, he said. But it was permanent, and it altered the world forever. That night, the connection between money and reality was broken. Dollars were no longer promises of something real. They became promises of nothing but faith in the word of a government. To grasp why this moment mattered, we need to look back. After World War II, the world's economies were fragile, yet hopeful. Global leaders established what became known as the Bretton Woods system. Under this framework, most currencies were pegged to the US dollar, and the dollar itself was pegged to gold $35 for 1 ounce. The system worked because it offered stability. Inflation was limited, trade flows were predictable, and gold acted as a tangible anchor for trust. But by the late 1960s, America faced mounting pressures. The cost of the Vietnam War, combined with ambitious domestic programs, meant dollars were spreading rapidly across the globe, yet the gold reserves in Fort Knox were finite. Foreign governments began requesting conversions, seeking the gold that supposedly backed their dollars. The U.S. realized it could not meet these obligations. President Nixon's announcement on August 15, 1971, was meant as a temporary measure. Temporary, he said. Emergency, he said. But it was irreversible. The gold window closed, and the world entered a new era. Fiat money now existed not because of tangible backing, but because governments declared it so. For the first time in modern history, there was no inherent limit to how much could be issued. Remarkably, this seismic shift occurred quietly. There were no riots. Stores continued selling goods. Salaries were paid. Life went on as if nothing had changed. Beneath this comb, however, the rules of money had transformed. Humanities had moved into a system where trust, rather than scarcity, defined value. And when trust alone anchors a financial system, history warns us, cracks are inevitable. This was far from the first time money had drifted from reality. Consider ancient Rome. Once, the denarius was solid silver, but emperors seeking to fund armies and lavish lifestyles began to dilute the silver content. Nero reduced it by nearly a third. Later, rulers diluted it further, until coins were little more than bronze with a silver coating. Inflation rose, confidence collapsed, and citizens turned to barter. A civilization renowned for order saw its economy crumble, all because its money was no longer credible. Centuries later, the Yuan dynasty in China experimented with paper currency. Initially, it was revolutionary light, portable, ideal for long-distance trade. But the temptation to print rather than tax proved irresistible. Paper money flooded the markets. Merchants lost confidence, and inflation spiraled. The experiment collapsed, leaving the economy in chaos. Do you notice a pattern? Technology changes, centuries pass, but human behavior remains constant. Whenever rulers can separate money from intrinsic value, they do so. And every time, the public bears the cost. Nixon's decision was not unique. It was a contemporary echo of an age-old tendency. The difference in 1971 was scale. Rome's collapse was regional. China's monetary failures affected parts of Asia, but the US dollar was the backbone of the global financial system. Once it left gold behind, the ripple effects reached every continent. Currencies floated. Central banks experimented. Governments discovered the intoxicating power of unlimited debt. At first, the system appeared functional. Freed from gold, Central banks could lower interest rates to stimulate growth. Governments could spend more, knowing they could refinance debts indefinitely. Citizens adapted. Inflation during the 1970s was real and painful, yet the 1980s and 1990s brought a sense of calm. Economists spoke of a new orthodoxy, that central banks could engineer stability, carefully managing economies like machines. This principle, known as monetary policy, shaped decades of booms, bubbles, and crashes, each cycle larger than the last. Yet the reality remains. Such systems are not built for stability. They are designed to accelerate. Debt must grow, money supply must expand, and trust must remain intact. Like a shark, if it slows, it risks collapse. This acceleration is exactly where we are today. Since 1971, global debt has surged to unprecedented levels. In 1970, U.S. federal debt stood at roughly $370 billion. Today, it exceeds $34 trillion. Numbers this vast are abstract, almost unimaginable yet. The system relies on their unquestioned acceptance. Every financial crisis since then, the dot-com bubble, the 2008 housing crash, the 2020 pandemic stimulus, was addressed the same way. More money, more credit, more intervention. The public was told this was stability. But in truth, it was relentless acceleration, and acceleration carries consequences. Those consequences are evident in purchasing power. In 1971, an ounce of gold costs $35. Consider Weimar Germany in the 1920s. Burdened by war reparations, the government printed money to meet obligations. Initially, the economy functioned. Factories reopened, wages were paid, but inflation spiraled, prices doubled weekly, then daily. Families carried pay and children crafted kites from worthless notes. When trust broke entirely, the economy collapsed, giving rise to extremism and long-term instability. Or look at Argentina, which defaulted 9 times in the past century. Each cycle followed the same path: overspend, inflate, devalue, collapse. Citizens learned to protect themselves by hoarding dollars, buying property, or more recently, using. The question we must ask is uncomfortable. If history repeats its patterns, why do we believe the modern system is immune? The US, Europe, and China are all vulnerable. The post-1971 global system is interconnected and fragile, entirely dependent on confidence. When confidence falters, the consequences are unavoidable. Yet most people never pause to ask the fundamental question, what is money? They assume it is natural, eternal, unquestionable. Money is none of these. It is a human construct: trust, rules, and enforcement. Once seashells, once silver, once paper backed by gold. Now paper or digital entries with no intrinsic value. The trend is clear. Each step further from tangible reality increases vulnerability to manipulation. Today, governments are pushing digital currencies, central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, promises of convenience and speed masked total control, every transaction traceable, every dollar programmable, every citizen finances, BC. If money is already an illusion, digital currency amplifies the stakes. Cryptocurrency emerges as a proposed solution. Bitcoin, designed post-2008 crash as digital gold, offers a fixed supply and governance by code. Not politicians, yet volatility, speculation, and adoption challenges remain. It may help, or it may be another chapter in the same story. Power concentrated in new hands, risk distributed to the public. The lesson is timeless. Every time money separates from something tangible, power shifts. Governments gain freedom. Citizens inherit risk. Banks profit, corporations leverage, and ordinary people bear the consequences. This is the cycle. This is the trap. And it all began the day money stopped being real. So, how should we act with this understanding? First, we stop deceiving ourselves. We stop insisting that debt is harmless, that inflation is fleeting, that governments always act wisely. We examine history and learn to recognize the warning signs. Second, we shield ourselves not by chasing a single perfect investment, but by understanding the system as it truly is: a fragile construct built on trust, destined to falter sooner or later. Financial literacy is our armor. Insight into economic history is our tool. Real security is more than money. It is knowledge, adaptability, and the resilience to navigate a world where illusions can collapse in an instant. History doesn't exactly repeat. It follows patterns. Rome's denarius, China's paper notes, Weimar's hyperinflated banknotes, they all illustrate the same truth. When trust fails, money dies. And when money dies, societies transform irrevocably. The day money stopped being real is not just a date in 1971. It is a warning, a reminder that nothing permanent is guaranteed. If this perspective reshaped how you see money, subscribe. History has lessons, I'll guide you to them.